Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. A couple show notes before we get started. I know commercials can be annoying. I only have about 90 seconds of them at the front of the show, and it would really mean a lot to me if you don't fast forward, because it does impact how I get paid from those pre-roll ads. And I do see the analytics, and not everyone is listening all the way through. So if you don't mind, it's only 90 seconds. I really would appreciate it. Contact me. Best way to contact me is email john@wordballoon.com. Follow me at Twitter @JohnWordBalloon. Follow me on Facebook under my name and the Word Balloon Network. I have a YouTube channel that I've started, and I've got 750 or so subscribers. I'd like to get to 1,000. It's free. There is extra video content up there that you can't find here on the podcast. And as always, I appreciate your time and attention. Thanks a lot for listening. One more commercial, and then we'll start the show. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. Marc Bernardin is on the show today. How about that? Marc has been on before. I've been a fan of his going back to his writing when he was writing comic books for Wildstorm. He did a comic called The Highwaymen, which I thought was great. It was about a couple of older spies that find themselves back in business, in a great action story. No capes in that story, but I really enjoyed it. And of course, subsequently, he's done excellent comics as well for Top Cow, and he even has a new graphic novel coming out from Comixology. But I'm having Marc on because he's been a great pop culture observer and journalist for a really long time. He's had stints at Playboy and Entertainment Weekly, and now finds himself back in the TV writing game. Has a couple brand new shows that are hitting the atmosphere. He wrote on is it Carnival Row, the new show on Amazon, and then also he's got on USA a Bourne Identity show about the organization that created Jason Bourne, Lodestone. Pretty neat stuff. And also, like I said, he does, of course, he's a great podcaster. I'm sure you know he's the co-host with Kevin Smith on Fat Man Beyond, formerly Fat Man on Batman. And also doing a brand new Battlestar Galactica podcast for the Sci-Fi channel, Galacticast. And he's doing it with Tricia Helfer. Really cool. So it's a great opportunity to talk to Marc about pop culture, what's been going on, some of the big announcements that we've all heard, what we're interested in, and I just wanted to kind of go over things like I do sometimes with buddies like Vanita Rogers and Matt Singer and people like that. I like hearing from the pop culture observers, so enjoy this conversation with Marc Bernardin on today's Word Balloon. All brought to you by the League of Word Balloon listeners. Thank you greatly, League, for your wonderful support via Patreon. We're in a new month, September, and more new people have been popping on. I thank you very much for subscribing to Word Balloon. Word Balloon is free. If you like what I do here and you want to help out the cause, you can go to patreon.com. Is it worth $1 a month to you to hear Word Balloon? Is it worth the price of a comic book a month? I hope so. I try to bring you great content. In fact, not only a Marc Bernardin conversation today, but also on the heels of that, uploading, I should say, for you to download later today, Art Spiegelman, the great independent comic creator, the man behind Raw Comics, and of course, the touchstone of the 80s alongside Watchmen and Dark Knight, the very seriously toned Mouse, which is taught in schools to explain the Holocaust. He's an incredible man, and he's, I think, a very outspoken advocate. And he recently wrote an essay for a collection of Golden Age Marvel comics, and Marvel put they wanted him to edit his essay, and so instead he withdrew it. And we talk about that and a whole lot more in the companion upload episode today on Word Balloon. But again, that's through the help of the League of Word Balloon listeners. If you like what you hear on Word Balloon and you want to help out the cause, go to patreon.com/wordballoon. Thank you, League of Word Balloon listeners. Word Balloon is also brought to you by Aftershock Comics. Great comics from Aftershock. They've been proving it all year, but this was the case even before with things like Jimmy's Bastards from Garth Ennis and Animosity from Marguerite Bennett. Great stuff from people like my buddy Cullen Bunn, who continues to come out with great Aftershock books. Night Temporal is his brand new one, but he's done things like The Brothers Dracul and Dark Ark with Juan Doe. Of course, my good friend Phil Hester has Stronghold at Aftershock, a great book. My buddy Tim Seeley has an excellent book called Dark Red that you should all be aware of, alongside things like Trustfall from Chris Sabella, Matthew Klickstein's You Are Obsolete, just to name a couple of the great other comics that Aftershock produces all the time. Go to their website. I'm sure you're going to find a title of Aftershocks that you'll find interesting, compelling, and one that you'll want to add to your pull list. You will find story descriptions, preview pages, and most importantly, the diamond codes on their books and how to order them through your local shop at AftershockComics.com. All right, without further ado, let's get into this conversation with Marc Bernardin. I'm happy to welcome back to Word Balloon. Marc Bernardin, welcome back to Word Balloon. It's been a while, and your online star has risen, and mine has sadly sunk. I'm kidding. No, thanks for doing this, man.
No, it was my pleasure. I had a good time last time, and you're right. It's been a minute since we got to catch up.
Exactly, yeah, man. No, and I know you were doing you were working at Playboy, and that fascinated me. You know, it is so weird. I feel, and I get especially since Hef has passed away, the disapproving eyes and everything. I mean, the guy had a what looked like a cool life in the 60s became kind of a creepy life by the time of the 21st century. So I get it. But, I am fascinated by the Playboy impact on the culture from the 50s, really, up until, the digital world kind of made Playboy shift and become a different animal than it was. But it's like, okay, I get it. But, in that era of free love and also just that whole idealized bachelor life livelihood, there's that great Simpsons episode where Bart finds the Playboy and turns his treehouse into the swinging bachelor pad. And he's got the jazz on the stereo and everything. But, yeah, I was one of those little kids whose, older brothers and older friends had those. And it was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And, man, all the culture, as we talked about, in our first conversation. And I just wonder, Patty, do you know about Patty Farmer? Do you know this woman?
No, I don't.
She has been writing a 3-volume history of Playboy. And the first one was Playboy Swings, and it was all about Playboy's impact on jazz.
Mm-hmm.
Then it was Playboy Laughs, and it was a combination of the comedians at the Playboy Club and the cartoonists that did all the great, one panel and one page images. And, as you know, Hef was a huge comic book fan and everything, and he only got the best. And then the final one, she hasn't released it yet, it's called Playboy Thinks, and it's going to be about the interviews and the essays and all the literary stuff. So, that's the thing. It's like, yeah, along with the, like I said, Uncle Creepy and his creepy sex life, and all the objectivity of the centerfolds and stuff, there was a lot of good cultural shit going on in there too.
Yeah, I do think that the net good from Playboy outweighs the net bad. And there's a decent amount of bad. There's a decent amount of objectification and sort of subjugation and the bunny ears, for as amazing a logo as they are, also does stand for, on the one hand, women's liberation and sexual liberation and freedom and all that stuff, and going all the way up to Supreme Courts to trial to do sort of discussions and conversations and debates about pornography and free speech.
Yeah.
But then you also get Playboy bunnies, and you also get, that sort of a generation of women who are, prized for how they look as opposed to what they think.
Yep.
But you also get, the Fahrenheit 451 wouldn't have seen print if Hef didn't put it in Playboy. You don't get, Alex Haley interviewing Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. You don't get, these amazing long-form pieces of journalism and exposure to writers that would not have been exposed to the world without that magazine at its heyday. So yeah, it gives and it takes, for sure.
Did you see? It's on Amazon. I think it's still there because I think they produced it. I think it was called American Playboy, and it was kind of a docudrama, and it actually had real interview footage with not only Hef but a lot of people that worked for the magazine, and also it dramatized his life from creating the magazine through the 80s. and it was this 10-part streaming, like I said, docudrama, for a lack of a better description. And I thought it was really interesting, and I thought it was cool.
Yeah, no, I never did see it. But like that story is, like the Hev story, is totally interesting and completely captivating, and a very only in America story. It could not have been done anyplace else, and it couldn't have been done any other time. Like, you couldn't do it now, you couldn't have done it before then, but like 50s and 60s were when the social forces and the economic forces all sort of colluded for that guy to find that place and start that thing.
I'm with you, man. And also the magazine business of the 50s through the 70s just, fascinates me in the same way, being a broadcaster, the way the old-time broadcast world, for me, it's from the dawn of radio all the way till the modern era. But I just, in fact, I know like Creepy and Eerie and all those great monster black and white magazines of the 50s through the 80s, early 80s. That, I don't know if you knew, there was a biography that Fantagraphics just put out about Jim Warren of Warren Publishing.
Really?
Yeah, and it's, again, and he wanted to be Hugh Hefner in a lot of ways. And, for real. And, or at least according to the guy who wrote it, Bill Shelley. It's fantastic. And again, and that's certainly more in the comic book realm. But yeah, it's a great look at the rise of Creepy and Eerie and all of the magazines that Warren Publishing did, and it's pretty cool.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, man. So as I mentioned, streaming and stuff, did you have a chance? Were you at D23 this year?
I wasn't.
Okay.
I sadly do not get to play the journalist games anymore.
I was wondering. Okay, yeah. Seriously, all right. Outside of the podcast, Mark, what's going on? What are you doing these days?
Well, the podcast, Fat Man Beyond, now no longer Fat Man, I'm Batman. For a weird, Kev was like, listen, man, at some point DC's going to come for us, man. Like, we have Batman in the title of this thing, and we make money on it. Like, they're going to come and they're going to shut us down. And so it's like, all right, we got to change the name. It's like, all right, what should it be? And like, Fat Man Beyond. It's like, they're still going to come if they want to come. Like, it's not like we changed it so drastically that it's no longer like copyright infringible. But DC or Warner Brothers has never seemed to care. And I have the most fun doing it, but it doesn't take up a ton of my time. So when I am not behind a bar in Hollywood talking about nerd stuff with Kev, I'm a TV writer.
Well, yeah. And so, what are you currently on? Any shows?
The most recent thing that I was on, and I wrapped on it like 3 weeks ago, was Carnival Row. The first season of which drops in like a week on Amazon Prime. I was working on the second season because that is the world we live in, when you can greenlight the second season of a hugely expensive streaming show before the first has even aired.
I understand. Absolutely, man.
Yeah, so I was on that most recently. Then before that, I was in a show called Treadstone, which I think premieres in October. It's a Jason Bourne universe spy thing. And then before that, I was on Castle Rock, the first season of Castle Rock.
Wow, that's great, man. Fantastic. You know Julie and Shauna Benson, of course.
Oh, of course. No, I mean, me and the Bensons go way back.
Excellent. Fantastic. They've become good friends, and I'm happy as hell for them and my other buddies like Heath Corson as well. That, again, as all of you, this streaming world is fascinating because, like you said, just there, the point that, yeah, this stuff does get greenlit, I assume on just critical appeal from the powers that be, and the potential that they see in those things, rather than whatever the immediate eyeballs are. And like you just pointed out, I mean, Christ, these things haven't even come out yet as far as first seasons and stuff. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is also the way the money works on these things, which is, if you spend, like, I think the first season of Game of Thrones cost them $135 million. And, the first season, you're building King's Landing, you're building Winterfell, you're building all of these things. You have to do more seasons in order to make that initial expenditure make sense, in order to amortize that original outlay of cash. So you have to do season 2, which will be cheaper because you spent all the money in season 1. You then have to do season 3 because, again, that becomes cheaper because you spent all the money in the first 2 seasons. And the math of it, the economics of it, are just that, like, you can't be in the arms race that we're now in in streaming TV for eyeballs and not spend the amount of money that you have to spend and then not keep making it. You know, like it's not like a Fox show from the 90s where it's like, oh man, that was great, right? Oh yeah, we only got one season. Whoops. No, we almost don't care if people are watching. We have to keep making.
That's hilarious. That's very funny. Well, but then now we're seeing with Netflix, you know, so many shows in season 3 be like, all right, that's it. That's enough. We saw that with the Marvel shows. And, you know, obviously I got to pin down Loeb. He hasn't been on forever either. And obviously I'm sure he's not going to give me, you know, a peek behind the curtain in terms of business side as much as I'd like to hear about it. But I am curious in terms, as we all are, what causes then a streaming network to stop making a show? Because like you said, yeah, you got to pay for everything. But then, you know, when, you know, obviously they're looking at analytics. I guess that is when eyeballs do come into play by season 3. And it's like, okay, who's really watching and do we keep putting money into this or not? I guess that's my, opinion.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big part of it. Like there are, especially Netflix, which throws so much content up on the screen. You know, and only a couple of those things, you know, 10% of them become legit phenomena.
Yep.
10% become House of Cards or Orange is the New Black or Stranger Things that they will keep on making until literally like those kids are, you know, 35 years old.
It's going to be like Tom Welling on Smallville. It's like, I'm in high school. How are you?
Yeah. You know, so like those legit phenomenons, you know, will go for as long as they can squeeze them, but they do have the data that shows, and I think the economics of the way they compensate talent for them is shows get more expensive because everybody wants raises by season 3. So you know what we're going to do? We're not going to make season 3. We're going to make 1 and 2, and, you know, people who like it will have watched it. People who come to it later and watch it new will have 2 seasons of TV to dig themselves into, but we're going to move on to the next thing.
You know, I felt for Norman Lear when they made that announcement about One Day at a Time, and I don't know if anyone has picked it up since they Netflix dropped it. By the same token, it's such a, as you know, as a participant, an oversaturated television world now. I mean, and it's something you've discussed, I know, on your show. It's an embarrassment of riches, all the different options that we have. You can't watch everything. It's impossible. And I am in awe of the younger generation that is able to step in and binge. And I mean, it sounds like you and Kevin are able to do that pretty easily as well, that you guys go, oh yeah, man, I cranked through all 10 episodes. I mean, I've watched 2 episodes of The Boys on Amazon. I love it, but I'm kind of savoring it. And it's like, because I know it's going to be, you know, a year and change probably before we get a season 2. So it's like, well, I want to stretch this out, man, because I know there's only 10 or whatever it is. But, you know, so I don't know. I like I said, I get both sides of it. And also, well, you know, comment on that, if you will.
I mean, I watch as much as I can, but even that is, you know, it pales in comparison to the amount that's out there. You know, and I have friends who, you know, A, younger, which counts for a lot, and B, like, still actively journalists who, like, have to do this.
Yes.
And just watching the tonnage of stuff that they say, yeah, man, I just binged 3 shows over the weekend. It's like, how do you do that? I'm like, hey, I also have children.
Yeah.
Who make it so that I can't just sit on my ass for 14 hours on a Saturday and plow through a show. I just don't have it.
I hear you, man. That's hilarious. Yeah. You know, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, so like you have to like pick and choose. It's like, yeah, The Boys. All right, I'm going to watch all of this. Just because, you know, first episode, I will watch like the first episode of as much as I can.
Yes.
But when you dig in, you're like, oh, hey, that's kind of awesome.
How does it compare? I'm assuming having seen it all. Were you reading the comic series back in the day?
I read, I want to say like the first two arcs of the book.
Yeah.
And even then was at this point now like 10, 11 years ago.
Sure.
So I don't quite remember the specifics of it, but what I remember is the tone of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember that, you know, it is actively deconstructing a thing. And at the point in comics where we had already been deconstructing comics. So it felt more like, oh, hey, this is good. It's super violent and super profane, which is a thing I haven't seen before. But the text of it isn't overwhelmingly revolutionary. You know, it was the execution that was notable.
You know, yeah, go on.
And but where we are in our relationship with superhero content on the screen, you know, we haven't yet really begun to deconstruct it. You know, I think that Watchmen was probably too soon, the movie, for anybody to really, you know, dig into, you know, the themes and the meta narrative that superhero stories are about. And I think Deadpool was the very first thing that started to deconstruct what we know about superheroes and how we process superhero stories. But then for the boys to do it at length, you know, for them to be able to get 8 episodes to play out all of those tales, for them to get to dig not so much into just your lone Avenger. You know, now you're digging into the Justice League. Now you're digging into the Avengers. And you're playing with team dynamics and business and, you know, sex and race and politics and religion and all that stuff in a way that I have yet to see done before The Boys.
I agree, man. And in fact, that is the argument that I make when it's so funny. We look back at 2013, when Scott Pilgrim and the Wolverine movie, the second Wolverine movie, and I want to say one of the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man, they all kind of underperformed expectations, and Comic-Con didn't know what to make of it, and the thought then was, we've reached the saturation point. And that's hilarious because that was 6 years ago, and nothing has slowed down. But when people now say, maybe we're reaching the saturation point, I disagree for those very things that you've just described, in terms of we're only starting to scratch the surface of what you can do within the genre of a superhero film. And it reminds me of the Western in the best ways of, we're just getting into the anti-heroes and the dark side of these stories and what you could possibly tell. And, you know, the Ant-Man movies are broad comedy, and The Boys are hardcore, both violent and sexual, and, you know, everything else that you just described. And I think that's great. And I also think that it's wide open. And I don't think the appetite has been, sated yet. I do think that there's still a good appetite for that stuff. Although some stuff, I do wonder if, like, as we're getting into the crossover of the CW coming up this fall and everything, I wonder if the CW formula is starting to hit, you know, their head on the ceiling. And I know Arrow's going away, Batwoman just starting, but yeah, it's just, you know, and also, I think it works, I mean, and I wonder what you think, I think it works better on cable and on streaming, because that bloated, now bloated, 20-plus episode season, it just seems like that's just too big. And you just want to, like, okay, this is a bottle show that nobody gives a shit about. Can we get to the big bad and wrap it up? And, you know, you get those, I mean, I felt that way about Supergirl and the Flash on several episodes in the last couple seasons.
Yeah, you know, I think for part of that reason, I've sort of fallen off from a lot of the CW Berlantiverse stuff.
There you go.
You know, like, not to say that after a while you see the stories they're going to tell, you know, but they function as a, you know, I'm scratching an itch for you, you know, and that itch might be, hey, I get to sit down and watch a superhero show with my kid, and you know, he loves The Flash, and so let's watch that for 4 seasons. And after a while, like, you have been told the Flash stories you want to be told. You know, you've been told the Supergirl stories you want to be told. You've been told the Arrow stories you want to be told. And because it is all, you know, different variations on a theme, it all begins to feel a little bit, not even to say samey, but just, you know, familiar.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's all ice cream, you know. And, like, ice cream's good. And this is vanilla, and that's chocolate, and that's strawberry, and hey, I like ice cream, and that's cool. But after a while, you're like, I would really like a pie. You know, and so sometimes, like, even within that universe, like, all right, Black Lightning gets to, like, be, all right, well, it's not quite, it's like sorbet. Like, it's not exactly ice cream. It's a different thing over there, but it's still cold and it comes in scoops, and I understand it. You know, whereas, you know, over on Netflix, you know, the Marvel shows, when they were up and running over on Amazon and The Boys, it's like, oh, what's that? That's baklava. Fuck yeah. Let's try that.
I'm Greek, so I appreciate the baklava reference. That's fantastic. I say pizza. It's like pizza, and I love pizza, but yeah, if you have pizza every day, eventually you're going to be like, yeah, all right, I'd like a steak today. Absolutely, man. So, no, that's hilarious. You're killing me.
Yeah,
you know,
like, and they're all good, you know, and they all have things to recommend, but after a while, you know, you have just like, oh, okay, that's fine. This is where we are. Okay, cool.
You know, Ebert used to say movies can hit you in different ways as you get older, and that's one of the fascinating things is they have their own life, and you relate to them in different ways as you get older. And as you mentioned, Watchmen, the 2009 movie in particular, I think it's aging really well. I mean, it's got some weirdness to it still. I liked it more than I think most people. But as you said, I think as we get comfortable with the idea of deconstruction and now compare it to a lot of the MCU movies and stuff, I do think that, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I have a better appreciation for it now than I did back in 2009.
Yeah. And I think the thing that seems to happen with deconstruction, on the heels of deconstruction comes conflation. Like if you look at the Westerns, it's like, oh no, they made 1,000 Westerns a year because they were cheap, and you always had actors who wanted to get on a horse and shoot a gun. And so you can make them, ad nauseum. And then you get to like the late 60s, early 70s, and the mid 70s, and you start to get things like High Plains Drifter, and you start to get Wild Bunch, you start to get things, that are deconstructing the Western as we know it. They stopped making that many Westerns.
Yep.
And the number of them began to shrink. They still make them. There's going to be a Western every year or two because there's going to be some movie star who really wants to ride a horse and shoot a gun. Or you find some director who's unwilling to make a movie that doesn't involve people with horses on it, which at this point is Tarantino. But like, so I don't, in the same way the Western has never actually disappeared, I don't think the superhero movie will ever actually disappear. I just think we're going to get less of them.
I agree. Absolutely. No, and exactly. It'll settle down. But I do think, because even back to that 2013 period, or even that Marvel period before they created Marvel Studios, Elektra and some of the other misfires that we had in the early 2000s, it's like, I think we're bomb-proof, and DC-wise, Catwoman. It's like, I think we're bomb-proof. And really, I think the survival of DC movies is like perfect examples. And it was so funny to read just different fan reactions to Justice League and some of the misfires. Oh, that's it. That's it. I'm like, it's never it. Because one good movie will correct all the mistakes of the last dozen movies, and everything will be fine. And I liked Shazam enough, and it was interesting that critically it was liked, and didn't perform the way that Wonder Woman or some of the other superhero movies have. But the fact that they're moving forward with Shazam 2 and everything, I think suggests that it's like, nah, everything's okay with Shazam. And we'll take it on a case-by-case basis. But I don't think there's any fear of the superhero movie burning itself out and going completely away. I'm with you on that.
Yeah. And it needs to be, smarter.
Yes.
And that's what Shazam at the end of the day did. Like I am somewhat ambivalent on Shazam. There's parts of it that I liked, parts of it I didn't. But the smartest was curtail how much they were going to spend. And they said, all right, listen, we have Zach Levi, who, God bless him, is not a movie star. We don't need to pay a movie star. A lot of this is going to be like, a kid and his best friend who happens to be a superhero.
Yep.
And it's relatively small. We're not, there's going to be no glowing vortex of doom with a trash ring in the sky, and some giant machine drilling into the core of the earth. Like, we don't need to do that here. Like, so if we spend $60-70 million on this movie and we make $200 or $300 million, we'll do this all day. It always amazes me that you could make these movies for a lot cheaper than they do, but they just don't. It's like there's a world in which you could spend $40 million on a Batman movie and still have a great Batman movie.
Amen. Absolutely. Deadpool. The first Deadpool movie is the classic example of that. Fox unwilling to go at more than, what was it, 50 or 70 million for the budget. Yeah. And, so no, and again, that's what I'm saying is we're just scratching the surface, and that's why I keep going back to the Western, because you're right, man. I mean, we'd have the big budget ones, and meanwhile, Republic or Monogram or some of these other Poverty Row kind of studios would crank out those 60-minute Hopalong Cassidy movies or whatever, and they do just as well as Gunfight at the OK Corral with Burt Lancaster and Kirk Douglas and everybody.
Yeah, like Westerns were. I like to. They were the genre that is the most like romantic comedies for me, which is it almost doesn't have to be good. It just needs to do the things you want it to do.
Yeah.
Like a romantic comedy, like all I need at the end of this, like, Lifetime and Hallmark have made an entire industry out of this. is I need to see the guy and I need to see the girl, and they're going to fall in love, and they're going to have a problem, and they're going to overcome that problem, and there's going to be a couple of laughs and a goofy best friend, and it needs to feel as if I'm drinking a cup of hot cocoa and wearing slippers all day long. And like Westerns just need it to be. There's going to be a guy in a black hat riding into town. There's going to be a guy in a white hat on another horse, and they're going to shoot each other, and then one of them is going to fall, and then rinse and repeat. And like good ones could be good, but the bad ones still got it done. You know?
Yeah. But again, I do think that it's as the Western got more, from a story standpoint, sophisticated in the 40s and the 50s, and you got those great Bud Bedecker movies and the anti-heroes, and man, you know, people like Randolph Scott. It was, man, what an interesting career trajectory from where he started in the 30s to where he ended up in the 60s. And, you know, and again, I think the stories got more complex. And also on television, I mean, the explosion of the Westerns carried over to TV, just like the superhero movies have carried over to television and streaming. Do you make a division between television and streaming? To me, it's all TV still.
It's all TV. Like if I'm getting a story incrementally, then it's television.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You know, if it's showing up chapter by chapter, even if I get all the chapters at the same time,
yeah, I'm with you.
You know, then that's just television, and I'm fine with it. Like, and I almost don't care. And granted, you know, the television you get on a streamer is going to be a different kind of television than you get on network.
Sure.
But no, TV's TV.
Did well, and before we get into TV, I wanted to ask, because you made the allusion to the romantic comedies, the mid-budget films that we grew up with and really were part of the scene. Now it is a real struggle for all of these kind of films to find an audience, and I find that interesting. And it seems like the game has moved to the streaming channels for that stuff. You know, Always Be My Maybe, and, you know, the success of that, and then, you know, and the failures of some of these, like I said, mid-budget movies that can't seem to find a theater audience and stuff. I mean, you know, the game has moved over, and I don't know when, you know, I'm surprised the studios keep trying to put that product in the theater.
They keep trying because I think they realize that there is an audience there. You know, the audience used to be, I mean, the reason why those movies always used to get made was because video was a market that was insatiable. Mm-hmm. You know, like if you made a $25 million thriller or a $30 million, you know, whatever, like romantic comedy or whatever that was, it would do okay in theaters. It would be fine. There'd be your occasional Basic Instincts or Presumed Innocence or whatever. Sure. But then the balance of them would end up on VHS. And the rental market is what made that happen, because that needed to be fed, because, you know, Blockbusters and your mom and pop video stores was a gigantic part of the industry. And so that entire boom from like late 70s to the mid 90s is what gives you most great horror. It's what gives you most great thrillers. It's what ultimately gives you the independent renaissance, which is, we have to feed this beast that wants content. This content is cheap. We almost don't care who makes it, as long as they can make it something. You know, like Sam Raimi doesn't get money to make Evil Dead 2 if they didn't think that horror would do okay. You know, almost independent of quality. It would be okay. You know, you don't get Princess Brides, and you don't get, you know, Spinal Taps, and you don't get Stand By Me's and all that stuff. You don't get, at this point, you know, even Shawshank, if there isn't the, you know what, we'll make the money back on video. And when that disappeared, so went that entire class of movie. You know, because then you can't sell DVDs unless it's of a thing that they already saw 4 times in the theater, unless it's Disney, unless it's Star Wars, unless it's Avengers, unless it's whatever. You know, and so the great service that Netflix has done is give us the video store back. It's just, it lives at home and we don't have to go anywhere. But, and the appetite for those movies still exists. And so they can give us, you know, Always Be My Maybes, and they can give us, you know, other romantic comedies, and they can give us all of that stuff that we used to get all the time, and now feels like, this is exactly, honestly, what I wanted on a Friday night.
Do you think, a buddy of mine, Rob Meyer Burnett, the editor-director, he always is worried about the ending of physical media because of streaming and also the cloud. And it's almost like, you know, he believes the studios want you to start thinking about just buying digital copies of things, and that you won't be buying DVDs or Blu-rays anymore because they cost so much to make, and they're not the return isn't there, as you say, from the video market and stuff. Do you think that we're seeing, we're in the twilight years of physical media?
Yeah, I mean, I think we made a shift about 10 years ago, and I am as guilty of this as anybody, as we went from a collector culture to an access culture.
Agreed.
Like it used to be, I'm going to go to the record store, I'm going to buy these albums,
yep.
Or I'm going to go to the bookstore, I'm going to buy all these books, and like the things you had on your shelves was a portrait of who you were, and you proudly displayed the things that, the media that you intook. And then it just became like, all I want to have is access to the things that I love. I don't actually need to make this part of my persona, part of my outward-facing persona, because now there's a dozen other ways for me to build an outward-facing persona that may or may not be accurate to who I am. Welcome to social media, which is the biggest billboard for the you you'd like to be, as opposed to the you are. And so as long as we had access to a thing, that's all that mattered. Even to the point where we're buying access that isn't permanent. Like I remember hearing some story, I think John August told a story about how suddenly like a movie that he bought on iTunes disappeared from his iTunes. And it was like, well, what happened? It's like, well, no, our license to distribute that movie went away. It's like, but I bought it. It's like, well, no, you bought the license.
Wow.
And contractually, if that license expires, you no longer have access to that movie. But we kind of don't care. Like the buying of things is no longer, as paramount a concern for us as just, I want to watch it when I want to watch it wherever I am. And for that, I will pay you $15 a month.
Do you think the streaming services are aware of the leapfrogging that obviously does go on? Because, man, I'll tell you, there's a couple of those Apple TV shows, I really want to see them. I don't know if I'm going to get it right away. I think the Jennifer Aniston one looks really interesting. And it's the dark side of that Rachel McAdams Morning Glories movie that she made with Annette Bening and Harrison Ford, it seems.
Yeah.
With Steve Carell and Reese Witherspoon, of course, in the new one. But that, and also, my God, Ron Moore's alternate history of what if we blew it on the space race. What's it called?
For All Mankind.
Yes. Oh, my God, that looks amazing. But
it looks nuts.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the thing. It's like, all right, I've already got Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hulu. I'm going to probably do Disney Plus because I'm already doing Hulu and ESPN Plus. I'm a big boxing nut. And I know that that's the only way I can get boxing is having the two sports feeds from DAZN and ESPN Plus. But yeah, I mean, it's, and there's sharing and things like that. But yeah, I imagine people are leapfrogging. They watch Cobra Kai on YouTube and maybe they don't stick around once they're done watching it.
Yeah, I mean, it used to happen with HBO and The Sopranos, right? When, The Sopranos would be on, every 19 months you'd get a season of The Sopranos. HBO would get a massive boom in membership and subscriptions, and The Sopranos would end, and then half those people would cancel. Listen, I was just here for that show.
Sure.
I don't need everything else you have to offer. I'm just here for that. I think it'll happen. I think that Disney Plus is probably the most impenetrable of all of them because, they're going to have 1,000 Marvel shows and a couple of Star Wars shows and every movie that you've ever loved and everything that your kids have ever wanted to watch will all be on Disney Plus, and they will price it so cheap at first that it makes it irresistible. Everybody else will have a challenge of what is our giant killer app that makes subscription mandatory? CBS thought they had it with Star Trek. I'm not sure what their numbers are like. But they're doing 9 more Star Trek shows. Yes. I bet you Picard is the one that that puts you over the edge.
Yeah.
Netflix will do what they can do. Amazon is like, oh no, we're going to do Lord of the Rings in 2 years. Just wait. We'll make the thing that you can't not have Amazon for. But it's going to be ugly before it's pretty.
Will Netflix survive? I had no idea they were as mortgaged as they are in terms of their finances. It shocked me, frankly, because you hear that globally they've got 130 million or 150 million subscribers at, that global equality of, say, $10 or $12 a pop. It's like, well, that should be enough money to fund all the shit that they keep producing and stuff. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, they're the one that it seems like, at least, the Jim Cramers of the world, the CNBC people, are all like, yeah, watch out for Netflix because the bubble's going to burst. I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, the tricky thing the tricky place Netflix is in that none of the other competitors are in is that this is all they do.
Yep.
You know, like Amazon, the money that they're spending on content is a drop in the bucket compared to the money they make selling you toaster ovens,
absolutely,
garbage liners, and books, whatever.
Everything, yes.
You know, Apple will still make a fortune off of phones and computers and laptops and technology, and Disney, if they shut everything down and just lived on admissions to the parks, would be okay. You know. There's always another revenue stream for those companies, except for Netflix, which is we're borrowing time. We're borrowing the future to pay for today, hoping that we can make enough content that the future will then be a thing we can borrow more future on. And it's a race. It's, you know, too big to fail. And as recent history has shown us, nothing is too big to fail.
I want to go back to CBS because I'm a hardcore Star Trek fan. And I have to confess, I don't like Discovery. It disappoints me in a what used to always be smart, or I shouldn't say what always used to be, because certainly the other Star Trek series have had their misfires as far as stories go. But that said, in this world of we're putting all our eggs in one basket, we're telling you one story a season. I think they fail. I think they kind of, I mean, I don't want to sound like a troll, but I do think they kind of betray the nature of Star Trek. And I mean, good Lord. And also, there's a lot of misremembering, frankly, in terms of, well, you know, this Star Trek is diverse. It's like Star Trek's always been diverse. And it could be more diverse, and God bless them for going in the right direction and making it more diverse. But don't immediately shit on the past. And, hey, man, Gene Roddenberry was a skirt chaser and a casting couch producer. And that's pretty well documented. That said, he still, in the midst of the 60s, was like, no, we're going to have a racially diverse cast. Hell, we're even going to have a Russian at the height of the space race on there. And you're damn right we're going to have them on there because they're part of what's going on. And it just seemed like, you know, again, from Uhura and Sulu and the other examples, Mabenga, the African doctor that was part of the cast as well, that gets cut out when they try to put more commercials in. Usually you get Mabenga's scenes cut. But, yeah, I felt like, and also the idea that the crew can solve things. I mean, you know, Next Generation, Data might solve things this week, and Riker might solve them the week after, or Troy, or whoever. And, you know, it's the Michael Burnham show. And I think Soleil Martin Green is a fantastic actor, and I think all the cast. I think they're fine actors. It's the material they're given that disappoints me. I mean, it really does come down to the stories, and also it's just like, does Michael Burnham have to solve everything? I know she's the central character, but I was expecting a little, you know, more of a West Wing approach than also a classic Star Trek approach of this is an entire crew. And these are the best and the brightest and stuff. So I don't know. What do you watch Discovery? Any thoughts on Discovery?
I've seen both seasons.
Okay.
I didn't love the first season. You know, it found a little bit of footing towards the tail end of it, but you know, the Klingon stuff was weird.
Yeah.
Like, you know, just what I don't why is this the way it is? Like this is more trouble than it's worth. And the second season I felt was more fun, even though it did sort of get mired a little bit in. The season-long mystery of Spock was not a mystery that I needed to play that long on. I will say that what made the second season way more fun for me was Anson Mount as Captain Pike.
Absolutely.
Like I thought that I'd never thought that dude was funny.
Jeffrey
Hunter. He had a muscle in there that I didn't see him flex ever before. But he had swagger, you know, and the thing that when I think back to the sort of the classic Trek, it's swagger. And Michael doesn't quite have it, and you know, none of the other characters really quite had it. But he has it. And that's what sort of made me like, oh, at least somebody kind of knows why, when you like classic Trek, you do. You know, and at the very least, it's not as deep, and it's not as sciencey, and it's not as you're right, like all hands on deck. but at least it had a little bit more attitude.
Well, I agree with you on Anson Mount, and I'm glad. But again, it almost seems like those things were accidental rather than the main thrust of whatever story. And I use the West Wing example too, in terms of, especially in that first season, where Martin Sheen was the president, but it was about the staff. And I kind of expected, and shame on me, you get in your mind when you hear what a show is going to be about in the case of Discovery. And you're like, okay, fine, we're going to follow, a junior officer or, obviously not a captain. And that's okay. That's fine. But like I said, I was kind of expecting more of a West Wing thing where, all right, we're following the assistant chief of staff to the president. And the president's there. The president's going to make big decisions. But, the thrust was really Rob Lowe and Bradley Whitford and those, people and Allison Janney. I don't know. And also, God, especially at the beginning of the second season where Captain Pike is like, okay, I really don't know you people. Can you all identify yourself, please? It's like, yeah, man, we've spent 15 hours with this bridge crew, and I have no idea what Eyepiece Girl's name is, and Dreadlocks Girl, and Asian Guy, and I mean, it's like, yeah, can we get some names, please? I mean, it's just been too long, man. So I was kind of, it was, definitely, I think, a wake up, we know. You don't know who these people are. Hang on. We'll help you out a little bit. But then they don't do anything other than give each other startled looks when shit's going down. And it was kind of driving me crazy. It's like, come on, man. I don't know. I'm hopeful on Picard. But yeah, go on, please.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they forgot the sort of, when you're playing with legacy IP like that, you have to keep in mind that a decent part of why people are going to tune in is nostalgia, and you have to play fair with their expectations, and you could subvert them if you want, but you have to know that they're going to be there. And so when you show up to a show that you're telling me takes place, 5 years before Kirk gets his shit, then I'm going to have a certain level of expectation that the nostalgia is going to be fed. That the Star Trek that I grew up loving will be in some way replicated or represented in Discovery. And I don't think they were ever actually fair with us on that expectation. And you can't quite ignore that people expect what they expect. You can not like it. You could wish they didn't. But I'm going to show up to a Star Wars movie and there'd better be a lightsaber in it.
Yep.
There'd better be John Williams music. There'd better be the things that I know to be true about this franchise. Now you could surprise me and you could subvert that and you can give me things that I didn't think that I wanted, but I was really pleased to get. But you have to know going in what I am going to consider to be Star Trek. And I think that the first season didn't care and the second season didn't quite go far enough.
I'm with you. I didn't like Spock becoming dyslexic either. I'm like, no. And especially when you look at Star Trek, I'm trying to do my math. Star Trek 4, I want to say, at the beginning when he has the 3 computers rattling off facts and he's got to basically quiz them. He's doing Jeopardy, basically, Star Trek Jeopardy. Mm-hmm. And correct. And it's like, I don't think a dyslexic person can handle that, frankly. And maybe that condition was just as he was dealing with the Red Angel, as I get into the specifics of Season 2 of Discovery. But I just didn't – that bothered me, and I'll be honest, man. And again, this middle-aged white guy saying this, shame on me. But when they had a big scene in a corridor and you saw a crew member in a wheelchair, I'm like, okay, how does Cybernetic Girl have cybernetic legs? And this person who obviously doesn't have the use of their legs, how come they don't have that? And it's just like, I just felt like it was representation for the sake of representation. And it bothered me. Because it's like, it felt like they're trying in some ways, and Mark, I swear, I don't think of myself as a troll. I think I'm I think I'm an open-minded guy. I'm cool with female leads and leads of all colors and creeds and orientations and every other possibility. Yes, please. But there, like you said, there are rules, or not rules, but just ideas that are set up in Star Trek in a certain way, and it's like, well, what's the wheelchair person doing there? I don't understand that, and it, like, to me, it felt like it was trying to be woke versus and then it was completely unnecessary. The guy didn't have any lines. I mean, he was totally just in the background. I'm just like, okay,
it's one of those to do that. I understand the impetus behind it, which is these are just people who serve on a Starfleet vessel, And could there be a wheelchaired officer? Absolutely. You kind of want a little bit of that story just so that it makes sense in your head. Yeah. And if you're not going to do it's one of those a bit of a double-edged sword, which is you shouldn't have to explain everybody this is just the fabric of this ship. But at the same token, if a thing feels out of place, then you might need to, hang a lantern on it. We know it feels weird, so let's talk about it a little bit, And I don't particularly feel like I need representation in every story that I ever intake. One of my favorite movies of all time is Master and Commander: Far Side of the World, and there is not a female person in sight in that movie.
Yep.
Because you're on a naval vessel, during the Napoleonic Wars, where they did not allow women to serve.
Yep.
And it's I love this movie. I love everybody in it. I'm mindful of the fact that there's no female characters at all. But at the same token, there shouldn't be, because at this time in this place, that's the fabric of the world. And also, there are children who are officers aboard this ship. And that is also, at that time in that place, what happened. Mm-hmm. If you're going to tell me that at this time in this place, there are wheelchair officers, okay, that's cool. Make them a person that I'm going to understand. Make them Geordie LaForge.
Right.
Make them a person. Oh, okay, no, this guy's blind, but he's an engineer. How? Why? Okay, cool. Moving on.
Right. Right.
I'm not asking the question.
No, I'm with you, man. No, absolutely. Totally. Now, you mentioned Star Wars, and so what has been your general feeling of the movies we've gotten in the current Star Wars era, starting with Force Awakens?
I'm not going to say that I'm unique, because I think there are far many of us out there than might be expected. I quite liked The Last Jedi. I feel like the first, Force Awakens is, again, nostalgia.
Yes.
It is, let me repackage the thing that you loved in a way that is slightly different but mostly the same. And that's fine. Star Wars, the modern iterations of Star Wars have always relied on nostalgia. It's a nostalgia engine of let me make you feel the way you felt when you first saw Star Wars. And, and so Force Awakens does that to a T. Well, I'm absolutely going to give you everything you've ever wanted out of Star Wars. Except for one bit where we kill the old guy. The second movie is far less concerned with the nostalgia. It is more concerned with, let me keep telling you this story. Let me surprise you in ways you didn't think you were going to be surprised. Let me subvert and let me, dismantle. Let me deconstruct what you think Star Wars actually is. And I think that part of the resistance is most people didn't want their Star Wars deconstructed. They just wanted to replicate it. Give me the thing that I like in the way that I like it.
Sure.
Which is sort of the problem that old timers have with the prequels, which is, I don't need to know how any of this happened. I don't need to know why Darth Vader's Darth Vader. I don't none of this is adding to my experience with these characters. So don't like it. Just give it to me again. Just a little bit different, but mostly the same. So I still do look forward greatly to The Rise of Skywalker,
sure.
Even though, it feels as if in the same way that Ryan undid some of what JJ did, JJ's now undoing some of what Ryan did. It's weird, $400 million game of tennis where they just keep on banging this gold ball back and forth and seeing who can do what with it. But yeah, Star Wars is in my blood. Star Wars is part of the reason why I am the way that I am. It's the very first tragedy I ever was exposed to.
Ooh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And Empire is, I'm sure, a generation's very first tragedy of, oh wait, you mean the good guys don't always win? Oh wait, you mean just getting out alive is enough of a victory? We lost. How is losing a thing that we do? And I think it's operatic in that way.
Absolutely.
It's wonderful.
Yes.
So I with great anticipation look forward to Rise of Skywalker, and I also with great anticipation look forward to it being over. A story without an end isn't really a story,
True.
And we have spent so much time with the Skywalker family. that like there have got to be other stories to tell in the Star Wars universe. Like it's one of the reasons I'm excited for the Mandalorian.
Me too.
It's one of the reasons I'm somewhat excited for the Kenobi show, whatever that's going to be.
Yeah.
Even though it wires directly in, and it's mostly nostalgia anyway. But like, tell me stories that don't involve the chosen one, that just involve like anyone, and that is kind of where my heart is leading me now.
I'm with you. I liked Last Jedi more than a lot of people. My only disappointment is that the original trio didn't have more to do. The choice to kill off Han in the first movie really sucked. It would have been nice to see the three of them together, and also more of a handoff to this new generation of characters, and making them all. I mean, you got Luke and Kylo's story kind of linked together. You kind of have Poe and Leia's story, at least suggested that it's linked together. But it would have been nice to see everybody for one last round. I get that we don't want to follow heroes in their 60s and 70s, and that a younger generation doesn't care about these characters the way we do. But you're right, and it's kind of that same thing of the Star Trek thing of, you got a whole generation of fans. You could have done a little bit better of a job with their expectations while introducing these new characters. And you're right about about the tennis as far as from director to director. It's like, I always said, it's like those classic like Laurel and Hardy or Three Stooges things where they paint a floor and they paint themselves in a corner and then they hand off to the next guy and say, all right, you fix it now. You let's see what you do. And
Totally.
I am curious to see how it ends. And like you said, no, I am ready for other stories. Did you ever read any of that Dark Horse stuff when they were making Star Wars comics for 20 years? And some of the other, or the Timothy Zahn books? Because in the Zahn case, I guess they did still follow a lot of the Skywalker stuff. But I always felt like, Crimson Empire was a Dark Horse story that I thought was really interesting about one of the Emperor's guards who has second thoughts and in the same way that Finn breaks away as a stormtrooper and stuff, or Tales of the Jedi and Tales of the Sith. I just felt like they did tell all these other interesting stories about other characters who are living in this world or universe. And I just think we got other unique stories. And I thought people like John Ostrander in particular was a great writer that could tell these great Star Wars stories featuring other characters and stuff. Did you ever read any of that?
I never dipped that deep into the extended universe.
That's cool.
Other than like reading Splinter in the Mind's Eye. I was like,
Alan D. Foster, sure, man. The first spinoff.
Yeah, when I was like 9 years old, I was like, "There's more Star Wars. Give me more Star Wars." But yeah, I long for more different Star Wars stories. I long for more different people to get to tell Star Wars stories. And for me, it's funny, I remember talking to Kevin about this. He was like, I would bet all of the money in my pocket against all the money in your pocket that JJ has found a way for Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher and Harrison Ford to be together again.
I hope so.
I'm sure that for him, the guy who did Force Awakens, the guy who had set up all of this stuff, that you don't make a Star Wars movie. You don't make the last Star Wars movie if you can't have those three people together again.
Boy, that's going to be interesting to find out. And again, I feel the same way. And much like Star Trek, I'm there. I'll be there for Season 3 of Discovery. I'll be there for Picard and Lower Decks and all these other ideas that they're shooting out for Star Trek, because I love Star Trek. And I'm of that generation that, enjoyed 6 or 7 years of Star Trek before Star Wars came out. And so I can love them both equally, and not, I love the people that pit one against the other. And it's like, for me, it's just more sci-fi, and the fantasy aspect of Star Wars made it different from what Star Trek represented and everything. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm cool with it, and I'm happy to see it go. And it's interesting because I know other people are like, this isn't being made for me; it's being made for another generation. I don't feel that with either Star Trek or Star Wars, really, in terms of. Maybe they are consciously doing it. Certainly, do you agree as far as Star Wars goes? That BB-8 being created and some of the other things that they did were really for a merchandise grab, and I kind of get that, and it is a shame because you sacrifice R2 in the process, and maybe I don't believe the whole to use the original characters you need to do a licensing fee. because I do think Disney bought Lucasfilm's lock, stock, and barrel for the money they spent. But I do understand JJ probably wanting to create some characters that he can specifically make money off of, and giving C-3PO the red arm suddenly makes those figures different from the classic versions. And again, BB-8 versus R2-D2. But, I just kind of, again, I wonder sometimes if that's the money grab versus, paying attention to what would work in the story. I don't know.
I mean, I don't think that those decisions get made at the highest level for money grab reasons. I think I want to leave my mark on this particular universe. It's like if I'm, if you get to write whatever the hell, let's say Green Lantern for a while, you want to invent like a new lantern.
I'm with you.
Someone just like that's the fun of telling that story, of getting to add a little bit to the fabric of this world, and getting to have played with the toys that exist, because those toys are awesome and fun, but bringing new toys in and seeing what happens when new characters rub against those old toys. And it's not as if they weren't already going to resell a bunch of friggin' toys. Like R2 and C-3PO never get old, but there's a whole new generation that doesn't have those toys. So if all they wanted to do was sell those toys, they'd have been totally happy selling those toys. I'm sure, nobody was going to say, don't make any new characters. But I don't think it was like, oh, you need to invent 7 new characters so that we can put out a new box set at some point.
Yeah.
Because honestly, as a storyteller, that can't be one of your, and at that level, that really can't be the math you're doing in your head of I have to make the toy people happy. They'll be happy regardless. But it's, hey, I want something that does a bit of a different thing. Not everybody who's pilots an X-Wing needs to have a droid. Not every droid is going to be R2-D2. And if Poe is going to be the greatest pilot in the galaxy, he needs his own droid. So what's that going to be?
Fair enough. No, I like that. DC Universe, their streaming service. Have you watched everything?
I haven't watched everything. I've watched, I really liked Swamp Thing. I think I watched an episode of Titans, and I went back and started watching Batman Beyond and some of the
that's great.
And the animated series
that's
stuff.
Great.
But it like all of these streaming networks, all these streaming services have the problem of what is the undeniable thing that I'm going to watch. And I've heard that Doom Patrol is fantastic. I didn't get to watch it when it first launched, and it felt like it played in the same kind of sphere as if I'm going to watch a deconstruction of a superhero thing, am I going to watch Doom Patrol? Am I going to watch Umbrella Academy? Or am I going to watch The Boys? And I picked one of them. I'm sure they all have things to recommend, and I'm sure that if I find myself with dysentery and laid up for a while.
Oh, geez, for real? Holy cow!
Yeah, no, I would love to. I would love a very mild tapeworm.
Oh, I see. Something you actually had it. I'm like, oh shit, man, that sucks.
No. I'm looking forward to hey, listen, man, we're gonna lay you up for a week. You're gonna lose 15 pounds, but it's not gonna be bad. Again, it's gonna run its course, and you can catch up on a bunch of TV. I would love that.
See, I missed my opportunity. I actually had an infection on my ankle, a flesh-eating virus that laid me up for 5 weeks in the hospital at the beginning of the year. And also, once they let me out of the hospital, you can't go to work right away. So I wasn't able to go back to work till mid-March. And and yeah, man, I'll be honest. While I was down with that, I was worried that it would go bad. I couldn't focus on new stuff. So literally, I'm watching Green Acres reruns on Amazon and stuff like that. In terms of, all right, I just need some wallpaper that I can kind of get my mind off of things, but I can't. I couldn't lock into an original story. But that said, that's interesting. Back to the comparisons of deconstruction, I do think each had its own flavor of deconstruction, and are unique presentations in their own way. Umbrella Academy, Doom Patrol, and The Boys, and as much as well. And we haven't mentioned it, but HBO obviously coming back to Watchmen with his new Damon Lindelof show. I'm interested. I don't know what it is. I see the, trailers, and I see, a bit of the familiar, but also that they're going in, he's going in his own way. And I'm intrigued by that, because what does the Watchmen universe look like after Ozymandias succeeds and Manhattan leaves?
Yeah, like it always seemed as if he knew, as I'm sure the readers of the book knew, that there's nothing to be gained from readapting,
right.
the classic text. And so, like, if you're going to do Watchmen, what do you do? And, and if those characters sort of came forward out of, like, Reagan's America into Trump's America, how do they react to that? And, like, that's fascinating to me.
Me too.
It's trying to, be adherent to the spirit, if not the letter, of those characters, and then giving them whole new problems to solve and whole new, villains to fight and whole new, themes to wrestle with. Like, I can't wait.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued. And man, when they announced that Redford was being the president like he is in the comic, that's fantastic. And also, I really was sad when his last movie, That Old Man and the Gun, it's like, oh, Redford's going away. And I'm like, I get it. He's in his 80s. He wants to relax. It's like Connery, 12 or so years after, and of course after a lousy movie, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, unfortunately, that Connery decided to give up and then relax. But yeah, it's like, oh man. So it's fun. It'll be fun to see Redford, I think, in there. And man, Regina King, I always think she's great.
She's awesome. Yeah. Don Johnson.
Yeah. And
the cast is ridiculous.
No, and what's his face? Even as Ozymandias, Jeremy Irons. I mean, I think that's great casting as well. It's gonna. I'm holding out hope, and I'll be watching carefully. DC, they shuttered, as Vertigo and Mad Magazine, and also you get this vibe from AT&T that they don't want to be in the publishing business. They divested Sports Illustrated in Time. I'm again. I mean, as we both have mutual friends that are in the comic book business, I'm now worried, because I don't think DC and comics would go away. But I had Marty Pasco on years ago, and he kind of, in a future shock way, wondered, when do these companies that own these IPs, they're going to hang on to the IPs, but they don't necessarily need to be in the publishing business anymore, given how small of a percentage that money made is compared to the TV shows and the films. Couldn't you see them license the characters and give them to, or sell the license to an IDW or a Boom or one of these other second-tier publishers, and we'll still get Superman comic book stories, they just won't be published by Time Warner anymore, or whatever, or Warner anymore. What are your thoughts on what's going on right now over there?
I mean, it's possible. I think the margins are relatively small. Like I remember when I worked at the Hollywood Reporter at the time, they were owned by the same company that owned the Dodgers.
Okay.
And if you the Hollywood Reporter was the smallest line item on the budget list of everything they had. And we were still spending millions of dollars to make that magazine. But it's like when you're dealing with $1 billion sports team,
sure,
and then these knuckleheads over there need $10 million to do a magazine, who cares? Whatever. I think that in the grand scheme of things, AT&T, Warner Brothers, whatever the name of that behemoth is, all the things that they have to spend money on, DC Comics will require so little attention and so little outlay that, all right, I suppose we could save, $20 million a year if we stopped publishing these comics. But it's $20 million a year. In that scheme, you're arguing over nickels.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah.
So I see a world in which, there is either a scaling back of the number of comics with the same characters in it they publish. There was a time that Logan was in 9 different comic books. It's you know what? You don't need that. We would love for you to create new IP that we can then exploit, but we don't need to spend as much money as we are now spending on different variations on old IP.
I hear you, man. Yeah, go on. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when those companies, when Marvel and DC are of use, it's be research and development. Find us a new thing.
Sure.
Find us, give us, Shuri. Give us, some character who we had never heard of before that is suddenly like, yeah, make Jane Foster Thor. That's great. You know, how much did we spend letting Jason Aaron make that as a comic book? Next to nothing. Then it's going to be a movie that's going to make us another $600 million. Great. That was money well spent. Thanks, Marvel Publishing. You know, like, do more of that. Like, innovate when it's cheap and when you have a built-in audience, you know, and when you can put it on the page and see if it sticks. Like, those companies should all be functioning that way. You know, like, be bold. The margins for your failure are so small that, like, take risks, do what you like, have a good time, you know, make up some stuff.
No, I agree with you, and I know that was Paul Levitz's original argument to the powers that be at Warner's back in the late 70s when they were thinking about, do we really need to make new comic books? And he said exactly that consider DC your IP laboratory where new concepts can be made. And yeah, I hope you're right. And I can also see, like you said, a scaling back as well. And I think it's uniquely a DC problem, in air quotes. I'm not sure if it is a problem or not. It seems like Disney understands Marvel's publishing role. But by the same token, I know that the kids' comics, Marvel isn't making those. They do license those to IDW and some of the second-tier publishers to make kids' Star Wars comics and kids' superhero comics and stuff, or what they think of as kids' superhero comics. You know, how about your comic book output? What any ideas? Anything percolating?
Well, I have a book. I mean, it's my comic book writing has been sporadic as of late. Some of it is because it's a two-way street. Some of it is I have found myself a little too busy to do comics, and comics has found itself not really wanting me to do comics.
Okay. I hear you, man.
which is fine. But I have a book coming out this winter via Comixology Originals, a graphic novel that I'm very excited about. A story that I've been wanting to tell for a very long time. It's called Adora and the Distance. And it's a kid's book. It's a sort of maybe it's middle grade, maybe it's a little bit older. I'm always fuzzy on the distinctions between middle grade and YA.
I'm with you.
But yeah, it's about a little girl sort of trapped in a fantasy world of her own creation, and the lengths she goes through to get out of that world and into our world. So it's a quest book, and there's, you know, knights and pirates and monsters and all of that stuff. But it's also a bit of a story about autism. It's also a bit of a story about, you know, the worlds that the autistic mind creates and the lengths to which, you know, autistic kids are either trapped in the world of their own creation or seek to get out of it, and what that journey is like. Wow.
That sounds great, man. Excellent. And that's interesting that you're going the Comixology original route and everything. Who's your artist for it?
A woman named Ariella Cristantina. She's done some work for Aftershock, a little bit for Marvel and DC, but she's awesome. She's got this amazing line. Like the book is long gestating, and when I first came up with the idea, like I really wanted like Charles Vess to do the art.
Yeah.
You know, that super like intricate, like fine line with these gorgeous curves, and she is the closest person I found to being able to summon that kind of, you know, evoke that kind of feeling on the page.
Very cool.
Yeah, she's great.
What are you doing? Any cons? You know, were you at San Diego?
I was at San Diego. San Diego's the convention I can't seem to quit.
I'm with you.
You know, like, and it's a bell curve really for me. Like my enjoyment of the convention. This was my 19th straight, I think.
Wow.
And like, you know, the first 5 were amazing, and then the 2 after that were a little meh, and then like the next 3 were awesome, and then like just it rides up and down like serpentine, shell.
I'm with you. I'm a big in-laws fan. Attaboy.
And so it's like this past year, it was interesting because I was there not only to launch this book and to announce this book, but because Carnal Thoreau was there, and a bunch of the staff went down, and it had been their first convention, and so I always enjoy that convention more when I'm with somebody who's never been.
Sure.
And I get to kind of see the weird spectacle of San Diego through somebody else's eyes.
I'm with you.
You know, beyond that, like I'm still investigating New York Comic Con.
Okay.
And I think that's sort of the official end of the con season.
I hear you. Yeah.
and then we'll see what happens in 2020, where I'm hoping to hit a few more.
That's cool, man.
Because I do like conventions. I really do.
And, again, back to podcasting real fast as we wrap up. You're obviously content and you enjoy what you guys are doing, and you're doing these live shows. I can hear the energy in the crowd and everything, and you always get a good, excited, enthusiastic audience. You get great on-site guests occasionally as well. So yeah, it seems like, everything's going well as far as the podcast and everything.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's the most fun I get to have any given week is going to Scum and Villainy and talking with Kevin for like 3 hours about, the stuff we would talk about anyway. Like that's what makes that podcast work, is that it's two guys who would absolutely go see a movie and then stay in the parking lot for 2 hours and talk about that movie. Just doing that at length and with cameras. It's a ton of fun. And then the other podcast I do, the Battlestar Galactica podcast that I do with Trisha Helfer, is also super fun because it's getting to revisit a show that I love, that I've seen far too many times through the eyes of somebody who, ironically, has both lived it and never really watched it.
Oh, that's interesting. That's like Josh Molina, too, with West Wing, his podcast and everything. I'm really glad you mentioned that, Mark, because I did forget that you guys were doing that. And I loved Galactica, and I had the chance to have Mark Verheiden on to talk about it while it was happening, right after the big jump when, Baltar is president and they're on New Caprica and the Cylon invasion happens and everything. So that was exciting to do. And as we said, I mean, I'm such a Ron Moore fan, and I know you obviously are as well. And all those guys, David Icke and all the creatives that were involved, and that cast, what an incredible cast! Yeah. So that's great. I'm glad you mentioned it because I haven't. Shame on me, I haven't been listening to it. I used to love when Moran would do the commentaries, and in the early days of podcasting and stuff, and throw those up on iTunes. And
those were like my Bibles. Like I would listen to them like every week. The new one would drop. Here I am, and like I'm a Walkman on. I'm on the train going into Manhattan, listening to Ron Moore. Like the smoking light is on, and the scotch for tonight is at Balmoral Highlands 12. Thanks, Ron.
I'm a scotch guy too. Nice going.
We had him on for the podcast.
Oh, that's great.
Season 1 finale. We had Ron.
When did you have? Which episode did you have him on? Or do you remember what you guys were talking about, or just in general?
Yeah, it was the finale of the first season.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, we figured like if we're gonna get the big guy on, let's get him on and talk about the season as a whole and talk about throwing forward and all that stuff. But to like show up with like a really nice Johnny Walker Blue and announce at the top of the podcast like, all right, the scotch for tonight is this, the smoking light is on, the guest is Ron Moore. Like, there's a handful of people who will get that, but it tickled me to no end to get to do that.
You are doing the kind of show that I'm sure in the back of your mind you'd always wanted to do, and that is the beauty of podcasting, and that's what I preach when I'm talking to college kids or whoever here in Chicago about what you can do with a podcast, and I don't blame you, man. That's excellent. That's fantastic that you're doing it.
And, we shamefully ripped off West Wing Weekly.
That's all right.
To the point where, like, I was emailing Rishi to be like, hey, man, so did you have to get permission to put clips of the West Wing in the show?
Good idea, yes.
I'm going to rip you off on this podcast, FYI. I will mention it every time I can that I'm ripping off the West Wing Weekly. Sure. But that is fundamentally the model for this thing.
Did they get permission? They're now shop talk for us. That's very interesting.
No, it's fair use.
Okay. Is it a time length? Is it a length of a quote, obviously, or
like I'm sure that if they wanted to be crazy litigious about it, they could put some like it's got to be less than a minute,
sure.
And it's never going to be longer than a minute. But Warner Brothers, I am sure, has had nothing but good response streaming wise and even maybe purchasing wise for the West Wing off of that podcast, and similar with Battlestar, like. And we also luck out in that Sci-Fi is our host.
Well, sure. Okay. And they co-produced it and everything, yeah.
Yeah. So, like, we're not running into any legal hassles there. And, it's done nothing but help them to sort of highlight something that's already in their ecosystem. But, yeah, no, Rishi was great. And yeah, we totally shamelessly ripped off West Wing Weekly.
That's excellent, man. No, and boy, to hear that even more now I definitely have to listen. That's excellent. I'm so glad you're doing that. Are you going to? Do you think after you're done with Battlestar, how far into was it 4 seasons or 5 seasons?
4 seasons. We are like 3 episodes away from the season 2 finale.
Okay. Oh, okay.
So the big time jump we'll get in a couple of weeks.
Very exciting.
And then gonna ride this out until it's done. Like it's the upside and the downside is like, hey man, we know exactly. We got nothing but content for years and years and years, but there's an end.
Sure there is. Yeah.
Then once we get to the very last episode of Razor or whatever miniseries will be the plan. Whatever they did at the very tail end, like that'll be the end of the podcast. And then Trish and I will have to find new excuses to hang out every week.
There you go. Yeah, really, that doesn't suck. My God, where do I sign up that I get to hang out with Tricia Helfer every week? Good Lord.
They're our worst jobs.
She is so amazing, and every time I see her in something new, it's like yay. Because man, when she was on Longmire, I'm just like, thank God that it's like good because I really was going to miss her, and I know maybe if Bionic Woman had made it, she probably would have had a recurring role there. But I'm a huge fan of hers, and I think she's that whole cast. Good Lord, I mean, top to bottom.
Yeah.
Have you had a lot of other cast members on?
Let's see. We've had James Callis.
Excellent.
We've had Katie Sackhoff. We've had Edward James Olmos and Mary McDonnell.
Excellent.
We had Tamo Pennicott. We just had Paul Campbell. For Billy's Goodbye episode.
Billy was awesome. My God, I know he probably got like another Canadian TV show or something to do, and that's why he left. I'm assuming. Is that why he left?
He does tell a story about there was a job like a lead on a stateside TV show that he was up for. I thought he was going to get, and he had to like, hey, listen, I'm going to go for this thing. I hope I get it. I don't want to leave the show, but I got to take this opportunity, which ultimately didn't pan out. But it's like that's the gig of an actor.
Yeah, man, roll of the dice, absolutely, man. Have you had Hogan? Have you had Michael Hogan on?
We had Hogan on. We were at a convention, the 3 of us in Canada, and so we just did like not an episode specific, just we're gonna have a conversation with Michael Hogan, like me and Tricia and Michael for like an hour and a half, and he was fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
He's a riot.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, such a character. The problem is that there's a decent chunk of the cast that is either in Canada or up in Vancouver, or in like Jamie Bamber's case, like France.
Oh, is he in France right now doing stuff? That's cool.
He lives in France.
Oh, that's beautiful. Good for him, man.
So like, hey, we'd love to have Jamie on the show, but just the time difference is.
Oh yeah.
So we either got to wake him up at 2:00 in the morning, or we got to be up at 4:00 in the morning. Or
I understand, man. That's when I get to talk to Dave Gibbons and stuff like that. It's always like, all right, Dave, I will get up early in the morning to talk to you because I love you. And him and Brian Hitch, we've been able to do it where it's 3 PM Chicago time and it's 9:00 British time. So it's like, all right, that's not too bad. He can handle that.
Yeah, we can make this work. Yeah, and the cast have all been so lovely. Like it's usually like standard PR flack speak, because I've done 1,000 interviews and read 1,000 stories about the cast of 1,000 shows. It's like, we're really like a family. We really get along. Sure, there's a couple squabbles here and there, but really, I love these people like siblings. And that's never really true. That is a thing you just say during the day when you're doing press for, Andromeda or whatever the hell. But like especially seeing Eddie, Edward, I can call him Eddie because he told me. But seeing Edward James Olmos with other members of the cast, like it is thoroughly and totally avuncular. Like he is so tender and so caring and so invested in everybody who was on that show. It's beautiful to see because you almost never see it.
That's excellent, man. Mike Hogan became really good friends with Art Baltazar, the cartoonist, on the convention scene. And there was a Wizard Chicago show, and we were all sitting at the bar after hours. And all of a sudden, Mike Hogan walks up, and he's like, "Jesus, Artie, where you been? I've been looking for you for 2 days." And he's like, "Oh, Hogan, meet my friends." And all of our jaws are on the floor, and we're like, and it was great because I could tell Michael Hogan when he did that wonderful scene when Baltar was on trial. And Michael Hogan, I'm like, you had your Kane Mutiny moment of drunk on the stand. You're goddamn right, I would have killed him. And I'm like, that was fantastic. And he's laughing, and he's like, that was a great scene, man. But I didn't get to meet him the year before. I met Edward James Olmos on my own, but Art got to hang out with him, and it was the same thing. Like he said, he's like, oh, call me Eddie. And Artie didn't watch Galactica, so he kind of knew them all secondhand from other works and stuff. And with Edward James Olmos, for everything he's done in his career, he's like, sir, you're Selena's dad from the Selena movie. And it tickled Olmos and everything. And he, my other friends who were with him, he's like, oh my God, he loved that. He thought that was great that's how Artie knew him and everything. But no, incredible actors. And yeah, man, what a great cast. So no, that's fantastic. I'm thrilled. And now, you see, I'm very excited. I'll be downloading episodes as soon as we're done talking here. But as always, Mark, I really appreciate you coming on. And good luck with the graphic novel later this year. And also these new shows. Run down your TV shows again that are going to be breaking very soon.
Carnival Row on Amazon Prime drops Labor Day weekend, the first season of it. And then Treadstone on USA, I think premieres in October. The first couple trailers have started to drop, and they all just say, like, fall. Like, okay, cool.
And you said, is that actually Jason Bourne, or is it a Jason Bourne-like character?
It is in the Jason Bourne universe.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so like Treadstone was the company that built Agents, of which Jason Bourne was the most notorious graduate. But, there was never going to be just one Jason Bourne.
Well, yeah, I thought that Jeremy Renner movie was okay, too, and I kind of was intrigued by that, so, Wasn't it Renner? Yeah.
Yeah, so Yeah, it was a ton of fun, just lots of giant globe-trotting action-adventure spy stuff.
I'm a huge fan of all that stuff, absolutely. Who were the showrunners for Carnival Row and Treadstone?
Carnival Row was run by Marc Guggenheim of the Berlantiverse.
Excellent. Boy, there's another reason for me to call Mark and see what's going on. Absolutely.
Travis Beacham, who wrote the original feature script, A Killing on Carnival Row, 17 years ago. It was on the very first blacklist, and has sort of nurturing it ever since, and finally getting to see it come to fruition in a manner he never could have imagined when he wrote it in his dorm room in college, almost 20 years ago. So yeah, those two guys were running the second season of Carnival Row. Treadstone was run by Tim Krieg.
Oh sure, yeah, Heroes,
Heroes.
Yeah.
So Tim was the boss man on Treadstone. And then, in case you want to go back to the not-so-distant past, Castle Rock, which was run by, the first season was Sam Shaw and Dusty Thomason. And they are busily at work on season 2, of which I am not a part.
Okay. And where's Castle Rock running?
That's on the Hulu.
Ah, very good. Excellent. Very cool. That's awesome, man. Hey, I'm glad everything's working out TV-wise and writing-wise for you. And when you have time to make comics, if the itch comes up and the opportunity, I hope you'll scratch it. But regardless, we've got great drama to come from Marc Bernardin, and also great podcasting, both on Fat Man Beyond. And what's the Galactica podcast called?
The Battlestar Galacticast.
Very nice. Well done. Excellent title. Very cool. Well, as always, seriously, thanks for coming on and sharing your thoughts today.
John, thank you. It's been fun.
Okay, Marc Bernardin, I have to confess, I caught the error in myself once I listened back and actually started listening to the Battlestar Galacticast. Tricia Helfer, not Katie Sackhoff. Katie Sackhoff is who I was talking about. Of course, Starbuck, and she was great on Longmire, and even that terrible Bionic Woman show that didn't make it on NBC. Of course, Tricia Helfer has been one of the queens of basic cable drama. She shows up everywhere. Franklin and Bash back in the day. She did, a season on Lucifer as Lucifer's mom, and was fantastic. I hope she comes back to the show. She's terrific, and among other great roles that she's had post Galactica. So I listened to the Galacticast. It's really good, and like we said, it follows that West Wing kind of format. But that's okay. I'm cool with that. So, check it out. It's very cool. And, of course, Fat Man Beyond. Great conversations with Kevin Smith. So I hope you enjoyed my talk with Marc Bernardin. And we'll check in with him. These TV shows he's got going sound great. And I'm happy that things are working out in the screenwriting world for Marc as well. Anyway, Hope you enjoyed today's Word Balloon, brought to you by the League of Word Balloon listeners via Patreon. If you want to get to Word Balloon's Patreon page, you can click on the Patreon ad right there on wordballoon.com, or you can go to patreon.com/wordballoon. Thank you, League of Word Balloon listeners. Word Balloon also brought to you by Aftershock Comics, who are kicking ass with wonderful books. Things like Shock, Joe Pruitt's horror anthology that collects great new and old stories from a lot of familiar names in the world of comics. And there are things like Marguerite Bennett's Animosity and, books like You Are Obsolete from Matthew Klickstein, and other terrific books from Aftershock like Stronghold from Phil Hester and Dark Red from Tim Seeley, and Cullen Bunn's work on things like the Brothers Dracul and also Night Temporal. So really neat stuff from Aftershock. Continues to be one of the really cool imprints out there that is in some ways filling the void of Vertigo, but also being its own distinct voice as well. You should definitely check out their stuff. Go to their website. You'll find full story descriptions, preview pages, and the diamond codes on those books to order through your local shop at AftershockComics.com. And keep listening to Word Balloon, because we've had lots of great Aftershock creators in the past talking about their works. People like Stephanie Phillips and other people like, Donnie Cates was just on recently talking about Baby Teeth. So it's a pleasure to talk to these creators and what they're putting out there for Aftershock. And you'll hear more of that right here on Word Balloon. Oh, I should also make note, The Beat, Heidi McDonald's excellent comic news website. Matt O'Keefe, one of their writers, did a whole preview of the podcasts, the comic book podcasts to listen to this month. And he spotlighted a bunch of my buddies like Chip Zdarsky, Jason Latour, and also Declan Shalvey and Ryan Stegman. And then at the bottom, he's like, we're going to spotlight podcasts that have been around but might have been doing something interesting lately. And he said Word Balloon might be having the best year of my 14-year run, 2019. And that was really nice. And I kind of have to step back and go, yeah, I've really been crazy lucky in terms of the new people that have come on, and God, the classic creators that have come on for the first time. Jim Steranko last month. I'm proud to say that a companion podcast coming out today with the great Art Spiegelman, he of Mouse, he of Raw Comics, an incredible run in underground comics, and he and his wife do children's books. Plus, he's an incredible comic book historian, and made some news a couple weeks ago as he prepared to do an essay for a collection of Marvel Golden Age books, and he got censored, and he didn't like it, so he withdrew his essay. It's at The Guardian. I recommend you read it, and especially when you hear this great conversation I recorded today with Art. It was excellent. He is going to be at the Rockwell Museum in upstate New York, and I'll give you details on that appearance in just a week. And I'll tell you about that on that Art Spiegelman episode. But I wanted to make note of that if you are enjoying what you're hearing here at Word Balloon. And wanted to mention the nice article at The Beat as well about good podcasts to listen to. I recommend you listen to all my friends who are doing those podcasts. They're great. And it was nice that they put Word Balloon in the bunch as well. How about that? Anyway, hope you enjoyed today's show. Don't forget, next week I will be in Rose City. I'm hitting Portland midweek, a couple days before the show, trying to set up some things before the convention as far as other podcasts, and talk to some of my friends up in Portland. And I can't wait to, kind of touch base with some of the great people out there and give you some interesting content from my trip to Portland and Rose City. But until then, enjoy today's episode with Bernardin, and also, of course, the episode with Art Spiegelman, and more to come before the week is over, right here at WordBalloon.com. Until next time, Word Balloon is a copyright feature of Shaky Productions, copyright 2019.